Nowadays, there are many situations when the women become the victims of raping cases. The United Nations defines violence against women as any act of gender-based violence that causes or is likely to cause physical, sexual, or psychological harm or suffering to women, including threats of such acts, coercion, or arbitrary deprivation of liberty, whether in public or private life. According to the statistics of World Population Review in 2022, it's estimated that 35% of women in the world have ever faced such an issue. However, most of them does not even talk about such a situation and does not seek help. And of course, it has a negative impact on women's lives as aspects such as their psychological, emotional, social sides. Consequently, such a topic is actually the present life and plays quite an important role in our life. Our aim is to uncover how continuity oppresses women.
Historically, Kazakhstan society is built on traditions that have seeped deeply into the structure of daily life. On the same example, in families, it's established that a man occupies a leading place, his companion must hear and obey, not contradict the decisions of a man, otherwise she will be condemned by relatives and become a victim of the concept of uyat. In such conditions, the women feel psychological pressure on a constant basis, which increases the risk of weakening the mental state, and most often such people lose their own opinion and feel unprotected not only from their partner but from the whole society in general. So women feel powerless after they believe they are unable to deal with these physical and social demands of the environment.
The first thing worth nothing is that the fear of perception of society and the attitudes of others have an impact on the issues of uncovering of raping cases. This includes demotion, refusal of promotion, or dismissal. Some survivors may not report abuse because they don't feel it will benefit. If they don't believe that the police can or do anything to help, they may view reports of abuse as a waste of time, energy, and emotion. Unlike teenagers, they are afraid of punishment from their parents for breaking the rules or for their social group rejecting them, especially if the offender is liked by others. Parents who are not immediately informed of the abuse may feel betrayed when they learn, often years later, that they were not trusted as trusted persons, which were often creates problems in the relationship between parents and children. Based on the facts, cases from everyday life and our resources that we consider, we can say that the often victims of violence are not so easily calculated in the crowd of society, but any well-educated psychologist will understand that a person has experienced something like this, since at the level of sign language and behavior.
For the second explanation, according to the research on the psychology of rapists by American psychologists Dr. Samuel and Dr. Smithman, the three common characteristics were identified, such as narcissism, a lack of empathy, and feelings of hostility towards women. Despite these traits, these men were different people with very different social status, backgrounds, and mentalities, and as a result, it all comes down to psychology of the rapist and his importance in women's lives. Dr. Smithman comes up with the claims that rapists sounded like an absolutely normal people when talking to them. Anyway, it doesn't mean that we should justify the action of these criminals. And I want to mention that rapists had no remorse and blames the victim. They disagree with the action of rape. However, they agree on the fact of forcing themselves on their victims. So we can divide the motivations of rapists into two types. First, men rape for biological and evolutionary reasons, and the second is due to societal, cultural, or man-made reasons. And as a solution, we have to accept that there is a problem with our society in Kazakhstan. We should focus more on our people and its practices, and the death penalty, as someone might say, does not necessarily solve the problem. We must change the attitude, and we need to bring a great reform in our education, legal, and political systems.
Sexual objectification of women is a driving and persistent component of gender oppression, systemic sexism, sexual harassment, and violence against women. For example, when women wear short dresses or something revealing, some men immediately begin to stare, and as a result, women are subjected to violence on their part just because they wanted to wear exactly the right clothes. However, women do not have to suffer because of this. Unfortunately, we remember a case that happened in Kazakhstan where the Metropolitan Police detained a harasser who grabbed a 16-year-old schoolgirl in the entrance. The person who did such a terrible act was a 20-year-old student.
According to investigations, there was opened a case called petty hooliganism, and according to the article above, he faces 5 MCI or 10 days. Okay, that was the action so-called petty hooliganism, but after all, the innocent schoolgirl suffered morally, and who knows what could have been worse, since he had no right to harass a girl. For example, even in USA, no state classifies grouping as either rape or sexual harassment. That doesn't mean it's not a crime. Most state criminal codes also prohibit both sexual and non-sexual battery, an offense that involves unwanted touching of a person's body and that reflects our deeply held sense to people have a right to be alone. This conduct is usually a mind measure, especially for a first offense. You know that according to Grossman Joanna, we compared the punishment for violence in our country and others. We can note that the sentence for rape in China is death, which some might land for their sweetness. Egypt is one of the places that still follows a slightly outdated mode of death by hanging. If someone is convicted of raping a woman, he is liable to be sentenced to 16 years in prison in Israel. In USA, in cases under federal law, the punishments can range from a few years to imprisonment for the eternity of life. Another quite important aspect to mention is that fear not to make the rapist punished or unavailable of certain laws and regulations is also considered to be one of the main reasons of women being silent about such cases. As it was claimed by Lily Lufrow, the author of the article called "Why Society Goes Against the Rapists," there are many circumstances where there is a lack of evidence or not enough information to be considered as proofs to be the further investigation. As a result, we have the police and other governmental departments to not even try to deal with such an issue.
Moreover, the statistics data showed that in almost 25% of the cases, police never assigned a special person who would be responsible for investigation. And for example, in about 1/3 part of rape cases, the victim was not even asked by an investigator. And approximately 75% of circumstances of all cases were not even prosecuted for a certain punishment. So talking generally, in the United States of America, less than 1 in 10 rape cases were recorded. And turning to Kazakhstan, the number of rape cases also has a significant rise during the last years. In addition, there are many cases and situations when a major part of victims does not even appear at the court.
Even though in 2003 the government of Republic of Kazakhstan created the law about the concept of gender equality, the problem stays actual and global at the current time in accordance with KIMEP in 2021. The major principles and aims included the provision of equal rights to both males and females in terms of aspects such as economic development, career development, participation in political activities, and the protection from rapes. Nonetheless, the aims were not reached, and the state recognized that gender equality issues are still important for decision-making and need to be resolved in the near future.
A terrible realization of the problems of modern world comes. Statistics do not lie, as well as those few women who still dare to talk about the existing horror. It's not just a terrible experience in a woman's life, however, it's more about the harm in psychological, social aspects, mental problems as well. At first glance, it would seem that there's nothing to be afraid of, because we live in a society with freedom of speech. The endless expanses of the internet are at our disposal for expressing different opinions. But the fear of persecution and revenge is still relevant. This problem and fears are especially strongly reinforced by the lack of legal barriers and protection of victims. Stop.